Good evening, and welcome to another edition, in fact, another season of Leadership Matters, a weekly half-hour series aimed at supporting series. I am Dr. Kenroy Burt, your host, and I'm so excited because we are already in season 4. I can't even imagine it. This evening we have an excellent set all planned for you. I'm extremely excited about all that's going to happen this evening. But before we do that, let's pause for a cause.
Crumb's Bakery, so good, even down to the last crumb.
So welcome back. This evening I have with me for season 4 friend of mine, Reverend Joel Callender. She's a senior pastor at the People's Cathedral. And I am sure this evening is going to be an exciting discussion with Joel. So at this time, before we delay anymore, I'm going to jump straight in. Joel, welcome to this evening's program.
Good evening, Bishop Burt. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
Thank you so very much also for accepting the invitation. Now, we usually start it pretty simple. Who is Joel? Who is Joel? There are several persons who may know Pastor Joel, who may know Reverend Joel, but who is Joel?
Joel is, first of all, a daughter of Jehovah God. But further to that, I am primarily a family person. So I really regard family highly. I love the idea of family, and I love to be close to my family. So I am a daughter, I'm a sister of 6 siblings, and I am a wife and a stepmom to a lovely young woman, as well as an auntie to many. Some of them are like children. I have, I think, 3 or 4 of them who are actually like adopted sons because their moms have died. So I've taken up that position. I am a no nonsense, serious kind of person, but at the same time, I love a good laugh. I can be quite jovial, boisterous, and in with the fun. I love that as well. But I approach life with a quite positive attitude because I believe that if we actually receive the concept that God has given to us abundant life, then we should enjoy that life and we should make it as good as possible. So I do approach life with that positive attitude. I am a bookworm and a lifelong learner. There's always something to be learned as far as I'm concerned. And I feel like there's so much that I don't know about, I haven't learned, I haven't engaged before, that I really want to get to know things, So I am a lifelong learner. You will always find me in some class doing something. And that is me. I care deeply about people and their welfare, and especially women and seniors. I really have a love for women and seniors. That's where my heartstrings are. And I love to see people around me succeed. So I will push people, I would encourage them to do things that would improve their lives because that's who I am. And I am most of all a servant. I believe in servanthood and being here to serve people wherever I can. So, in a nutshell, that's Jewel.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that there are several persons who just got a totally different picture of Pastor Joel or Pastor Jew. I know several persons just got a different picture. Now, Joel, let's talk a little bit about your leadership journey. I know that you are now the senior pastor at the People's Cathedral, and I'm sure you didn't, even if you thought of yourself someday being in leadership, probably not this position or. But let's talk a little bit about that journey and what it has been like for you.
Okay, well, my leadership journey began quite early, like from primary school. I found myself being class monitor, then secondary school prefect, deputy head girl. In my first job, I moved on up the ladder to supervisory position at quite a young age. And even in our fellowship in Pawi, I was on the the youth executive committee for a while and so on before I became a pastor, which is 17 plus years now that I have been a pastor. But this leadership journey has been quite interesting. And it is primarily so because of the fact that I am a woman, and in terms
Yeah.
of where I am now in the church, this is still very much a man's world. And there are some times when you feel as if you are existing in a place where you are not welcome. And even though you know that you can stand up against the boys, basically, it feels as if you have to do so much more and you have to be so much more to be appreciated. But nevertheless, I still feel confident that even being a woman, that I have something to give. And for me, if I'm doing anything, it is with excellence. It has to be 100% or not at all. So even while that is the case, that you feel that way, you still give of your all. For me, initially, leadership felt like a burden or responsibility that I did not want. But as I've gone on in, leadership, I've found that it is a privilege to serve. That, you know, people are there, you're doing things, but to serve others and to lead, to me, has become a privilege that I truly enjoy, to lead people and in church and to help people in difficult situations. So that has been primarily my journey. It hasn't been easy every step of the way, but I'll tell you that I enjoy it. The difficult times, not so much, but there are days when you feel like you've had a victory, and so those days you go home feeling fulfilled, like I've actually done something, I've contributed to something, and that gives you that sense of fulfillment that you've served diligently.
Fantastic. No, Joel, you said something there that I want us to pick up on right after we come back from our break. So welcome back. Now, Joel, you just mentioned something that is kind of interesting, which is that you are a female operating in a male space. And I say I don't even know if it is just the sector that you're in that dictates that, or if it is just a case where within our culture we've grown so accustomed to male leadership that females, as it continues to evolve, and I believe it's an evolving space, as female leadership continues to evolve, that there will always be that discomfort experience, especially at the beginning. I want to say it to you also that I think to a large extent there's also a discomfort that is being experienced from the other end, which is the
Yeah.
males now having to welcome a female into the room, and I think that is interesting. But let's talk about that. There are probably a couple young ladies who are listening in, probably some other females who may say to you, you know what, I really would like to be in that leadership space, but here's the reason why I'm not doing it. I don't feel welcome. I don't feel. What would you say to them right now? You've been walking through it, but as much as you may have now started, I think that you may still have something to say to somebody who needs to get started.
Yeah, even though it sometimes feel uncomfortable, you have to understand what is your purpose and that you belong there, and you have to be sure of that. And once that is the case, you can truly walk through or navigate the discomfort that you might be feeling from time to time. And you have to be determined that you are going to carry out whatever role it is that you are responsible for, and you are going to do it with diligence. That it is not a case you will have a victim mentality, I am not welcome in this space, but that if there's a seat at the table that you need to take, that you take it, and when you do so, that you give your all, and you do it with integrity, that you give the best of who you are, and that you're not in there trying to be like a man, but you are a woman in the space that you are, and you are doing whatever you do with excellence, and it's not to prove anything to anybody, but you are there, they're doing it because this is who you are and this is what you've been called to do. So you go and do it. And I would say to any woman, don't be afraid to take on the responsibility. It is difficult sometimes, but as I said before, you feel fulfilled. You feel as if you're doing something for the benefit of others, and if you're a Christian, for the glory of God. So, at the end of the day, I would say to women, especially to younger women, go for it. If God has given you those gifts, those talents, and you know that you have something to give, um, take your seat at the table and do what it is that you're supposed to do.
Excellent advice. I think sometimes we become so intimidated, we don't take up the call, and we understand the calling on our lives. We don't take up the call. So let's go a little further. We are in a very interesting world today. A
Mhm.
world that is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. A world that we call the VUCA world. I mean, it's so interesting to see the dynamics of how things are playing out. It means changing models, every single thing. In this world, this type of world, this experience that we're in today, how has Joel Calendar been making it? What have you been doing to make it on a daily basis?
Okay. And I would say to you, this VUCA world is really a part of my day-to-day experience. And
Mm,
this has been, all of my leadership journey practically that has experienced some of this. But I would say that I've been making it through relationships, and this is so important in
mhm.
leadership.
Yeah.
I happen to people who can provide the guidance and knowledge, older people who have that experience, and you draw from them. So that's where the mentorship aspect comes in, because you need that as a leader. You must have people around you that you can go to and that you can draw from, who have experience and knowledge that can pour into you. The other thing is, in making it, I don't work alone. I believe in teamwork and having teams around you to work with. So my teams consist of people with different gifts and talents who together bring varying ideas to the table. And I, for instance, have a team of young people whose brains I pick regularly. So I sit with them and I ask them,
Mm,
about their thoughts about the assembly, what works for them, what doesn't work, what works for their friends and their colleagues, and so on. And these are the people who guide me in things like social media and, what is on there, how should I navigate them? Because I'm not ashamed to say I really don't know it all when it comes to social media, but these young people know all the ins and outs and the intricacies. So I make sure to sit down and pick their brains, like every 2 months or so, and talk with them about what is current and what I should be looking out for, what technology I should really be picking up on, what trends are among young people that I, as a leader in the church, need to be aware of. And then I have a team of ministers that I bounce ideas off. These are older ministers now, and we sit down over a meal because I feel that's an important setting where we can now put aside all the formalities and we talk to
mhm.
one another about what is happening. We argue about different things that we don't see eye to eye on. But at the end of the day, we come to consensus. But what it does is that at the end of that session, there is so much to work with, because it's not just my limited views, but the
Yeah.
views of a team of people who bring about a more rounded view of what we need to be doing. And then I've been making it because I keep myself informed about what's happening in the world. So I read books on current things, different areas that I need to really know about. I read a lot of articles, again, on current issues to keep myself up to date. And I interact with people of different socioeconomic groups and whatnot because I need to hear what their take on life is and what is happening now. And this helps me to gain a better understanding of people and why and what is happening in the world today. But most importantly, I've learned to lean hard on God in these uncertain times because I know that He is unchanging. So the first thing I did was to admit that as a leader, I didn't know everything about getting the job done and I needed his guidance. So I had to consult him every step of the way. And I'll give you one example from the lockdown last year is that I came to the realization nobody in the world knew how to navigate this COVID 19 pandemic. This was new to every single one of us. There were
Everybody.
no books, there were no pastors or bishops who could tell you how to walk through this. Only God knew. So you had to depend on Him. And I remember vividly, we'd been discussing, you know, among the pastoral team, how we were going to do the reopening, go back into church, and so on, how we would get that happening. And we'd had these discussions. And I remember one morning, God said to me, "You need to sit down and write a report on how this reopening is going to happen." And He said, "You need to sit down today and write this report." And I did because it wasn't a suggestion, this was a command from God. And as I sat down and wrote the report, He gave the guidance and gave the ideas. And I wrote it in completion and shared it with the pastors. And would you believe 2 days later, the government asked us to share with them our plans for reopening. And I didn't have to scramble. In 10 minutes, I could send them my report because it had been completed. And that's just to give you an example of how you need to lean on God. And that's the way I've been making it during these uncertain times.
Fantastic. No, no, Joel, I want to talk a little bit about some advice that we would share with persons who might currently be going through some anxiety. But before we do that, let's take another break for another cause.
Here's some of your best news since the lockdowns. 7 Crumbs Bakery locations are now open on Sundays and bank holidays from 7 in the morning. They are Eagle Hall, Wildy, Fairchild Street, Oystons, My Lord's Hill, Speightstown and Fairview, while the other 10 Crumbs locations open Monday to Saturday as usual. Crumbs for a wide variety of fresh cakes, pastries and bread. Crumbs, so good, even down to the last crumb.
Crumbs, so good. Thank you very much to our sponsors, Crumbs, who continues to be with us on this journey. Now, there are some others who may be indeed going through a little bit more challenging period. And one of the things you mentioned a little earlier is the fact that we need to glean from each other as we are walking through these things. Nobody knew, everybody started at the same place. There's one thing I can tell you for sure is that we were all built for this moment because God created us, and today we are alive during this kind of world, this VUCA world. But what would you say to someone right now who may be going through that, experiencing that anxiety and uncertainty and everything else? What would you say to that person who's listening, that leader?
I would say to them, be flexible. Reason
Mm,
being is that in the age we're living in now, change is occurring more rapidly than it has ever been before. And if we try to keep holding on to what was, that's where the anxiety would come about. And I found that if you get the mindset that, look, these things are going to change, things are happening that we have no control over, and therefore I need to be flexible and be willing to engage new ideas and new concepts and new ways of doing things, that it removes some of the anxiety from it. Because when we accept that inevitability of things changing, what happens is that we try to find ways to work with the changes instead of fighting with the changes. And that lessens that anxiety, it brings it right down. So that would be part of the advice. The other thing I would say to leaders is to stay informed. And I don't mean the sensational news that we get from some of the international news networks, but credible information from correct sources, that people who will be a blessing to us. And there are some good sources out there where we can go to and we can glean from, and we can get information that will help us to navigate the changes that we go through day by day. And it's not just COVID, but I'll tell you, even dealing with younger people
Mm.
brings with it, some new challenges, because they think different. They think in a different way than the older generation did. And so you have to be able to be flexible and to think about how you're going to deal with them, especially in a church. From a church perspective, we have had
And
some
Joe,
ideas.
before you move from that point, I am hearing what you're saying, and I'm saying to myself, and I want those who are listening to understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this this period, this space is for only young people, because
Mhm.
I think that is something that is a lie that we try to run in, that it's only for young people. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, it seems as though this space is a space where the way young people think is valuable. The way they think, the out of the box way they think, they seeing things differently. Some of the things that we may even have, say, 10, 15 years ago, challenge as being just rebellious, or just being too far out there. It seems as though those things now are fitting nicely into this space, and they're solving the problem. They're making things work. They're keeping things going. I don't know what your experience has been with that.
Oh, I agree with you, Bishop Burke, completely. Because, again, as I would have mentioned before, that's why I sit with the young people and let them bounce their ideas off of me and pick their brains and hear what they're saying. Because a lot of what they know and what they've been talking about is what have helped us through, particularly this period that we are in right now. And it is because of their thinking in ways that we hadn't engaged before, that we were able to navigate some of the issues that we had. For instance, one I can mention is, even like having church online.
Yeah.
For many of us older people, this was a new concept. Some people didn't want to embrace it, but the young people were, yeah, let's go for it. Can we try this? Can we try that? And you have had to listen to them to be able to see how best to function at this period of time. So I am grateful for what they bring to the table, and the discussions that we have, and how they are able to contribute to what we are doing now, even in terms of leadership. So yes, that is appreciated very much, for people like myself, who think in terms of transformational leadership, and how do we go through to the future, and how do we engage the different ideas that people have. So definitely, what the young people bring to the table is important at the moment.
I'm here laughing. I'm thinking to myself that several of those persons who actually said, "Oh, I can't even imagine doing church like this and doing that and all these different things." Today they're living on Zoom, and they're living on Facebook.
Oh
They're
yeah.
living in that social media space, because that's what they do now, and it's a really big change. Now, before I run off of this point, and I know that you're sharing that advice, but before I run off of this point, what has been the most drastic change that Joel has had to deal with in this period?
um I think not being able to engage with people face to face, that's the biggest thing for me. That a lot of things have had to happen online, or you had to use telecommunications, or you had to use social media to engage people. And that's for me, the biggest change that I've had. Using the technology and so on, it was not new to me, but this thing of being able to minister to people from a distance, that has been a tough one. Especially like funerals, and you go to a funeral and the family can only have 5 people there. Remember, that was the beginning. That
Yeah.
was really a tough thing for me to deal with. That here is a family grieving and they can't even be there to say the final goodbyes and so on. So that has been the toughest thing for me to deal with during this time.
And I had no doubt it was that since you prefaced this entire discussion with the fact that you love family and you love social life, so I can imagine that it would have been extremely tough. But let's jump
Oh,
back into this advice.
yes. The other thing I would say is that we need to nurture our relationship. So this ties in with what I was saying. And I think that we should have found that out even more, especially during this period that we are in right now. And for leaders, we need to nurture relationships. We need to lean on
Yes.
one another, especially during the tough times. And I know sometimes because we are so engaged with what we are doing and we're concentrating so much on our particular space that we get out of touch with our friends and our colleagues and so on. But I want to say that one of the things that will help us to get through this and to lessen our anxiety is when we have other people that we can talk to and share with, people who understand what you're going through, people who can help you to really go through it. That is what you need. Basically, to hold your hand. You can't physically do it, but I mean, you feel as if somebody is there with you. To me,
There, right
that's one
there.
of the most important things that I would say to people: nurture your relationships, your family. For me, going through and not being able to go and see family and so on regularly, that was a tough one. And it made me value those family relationships so much more and nurture them and try to draw closer to my family members. So I would say to leaders, who are in it already, even people who've been in it for a long time, and those who are just getting into the leadership sphere, nurture your relationships and make sure that the people who are close to you, that you show them the love and the concern and that you are there with them because we need it in order to make it.
Great, great. Let's take one more pause for cause, and then I'm going to come back and ask you a question, Joel, that I know is not going to stop you, but it's going to bring the best out of you. And welcome back to Leadership Matters. No, 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 Reverend Joel, you are years old. We know how old that is,
Yes.
and you are now in a much better place. One of the things that someone once said is life is oftentimes lived backwards. And I think that that is because as we live this life, we learn so much more as we get older, as we get more mature, and we go through several other experiences. But if there were one thing that you would want to say right now to Jewel when she first got into pastoral ministry, first got into pastoral ministry 17 years ago, 17 plus years ago, what would that one thing be that you would advise her, warn her, make sure she is aware of, whatever it be? What would that one thing be as she started her leadership journey?
Um, I would have said to her, and the good thing about um, me being able to answer the question is because I have some young people who just come on and I talk to them about this all the time, is for sure, make sure that you know you are called. Because it is when you come into pastoral minute leadership, and I've seen this with the younger ones who have come, I think we come, with certain expectancies of how things are going to go, and that they're not challenges that we are going to meet up. So along the line, if you don't know that you are called to this leadership position, you are going to stumble, you're going to question yourself, you're going to ask, but am I in the right place? But if you know for sure, this is the calling that God has on my life, then it helps you to really be able to go through those difficult times. And I can tell you, sometimes they're really difficult times where you ask yourself, look, do I really want to continue? And the answer comes in yes, because I know for sure that this is what God wants me to do. And I've had to say that to some young ministers um, quite a few times, that, if once you know this is what God has called you to, then these difficult times that you're going through right now, then you would be able to get over it. And I think that's one of the things that I would say for sure to me personally and to any young minister. Know that this is what God has really called you to, because while leadership comes with, for a better word, certain perks, it comes with a lot of challenges as well that you have to be ready for.
Fantastic. And you, if you're not equipped to do it, I'm telling you, you are going to struggle, and it is going to eventually is going to take a toll on you. So thank you so very much. This evening we had a wonderful conversation with Reverend Joel Callender, senior pastor over at the People's Cathedral, and what an exciting discussion I had with her as we talked leadership and we talked about stability in these uncertain times. This has been Leadership Matters, a weekly half-hour series aimed at supporting leaders. And I am Dr. Kenroy Burke, your host, hoping to hear you again. Check us out online. Check us out as we continue the leadership discussion. God bless you.